Hello. Do we do it?
Hey Drew, how's it going?
It's going well. I look stretched. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. It is surreal to look at though. That's weird. How can I switch that? No, that's the wrong way. That's the wrong thing. Here we go. All right. I am a little bit stressed. Maybe that's my Android camera. I don't know.
Maybe.
But yeah, man, like it's me with longer hair.
I know, dude. It's so odd. Uh, but you're a good-looking guy. I feel
Yeah,
like I could compliment you, and it's like selfishly okay for me to do this.
absolutely. No, it's great though because I feel like okay, that's what I look like with longer hair. This is what you would look like with shorter hair. It's like we're basically like the face app version, but for ourselves. So we can just like if you get a new pair of glasses, I'll be like, oh, okay, so that's what I would look like with glasses.
I mean, my glasses are around here somewhere. I could put them on, and like, dude, I could like put on this button up right now.
Oh yeah, and we can match even more.
We can match. Yeah, I could do this
Put the
and
hair
like
back
put.
on. Oh man, that is surreal.
And now we're twins.
We are.
I have a real twin, but he doesn't look anything alike me. So this is
No,
really,
this is
yeah.
crazy. Do you have any family in Ohio?
My mom's from Ohio,
Okay.
but
Maybe we're related in some way. I grew up in Cincinnati.
yeah, she was from Cleveland.
Yeah.
And I was researching your story, and when you were 31, you left engineering and you went on like a comedy tour around the United States, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When I was 31, I retired from my job as a high net worth tax accountant.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm 32 now. For the last 10 months, I've been traveling around, Europe and the United States. And I left to go become a snowboard instructor and go full time in men's empowerment coach.
Ah, how cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess for we're doing a Facebook Live for people who happen to catch this or see a little bit later. The context is um, basically I was on the Mind Pump podcast, and in one of the comments, one of your buddies was like, "This guy looks like you," right? Is that the context? And we're like, "Oh my God, we do look like each other. We got to chat with each other," right?
Yeah.
So funny the context to what comes up. So who are the celebrities that you get told you look like? I wonder if they're the same as me.
The only one that comes to mind is Jon Snow.
Oh, okay, yeah, with the longer hair.
Yeah. Um, I'm not too sure. Some people say things I don't really know the reference because I don't watch too much
Yeah,
TV. They're like, you look like so and so. I'm like, cool.
yeah, yeah. I get skinny Hugh Jackman sometimes, um, and Hugh Jackman plus Conan O'Brien. I think because of the hair.
Yeah.
And then I wonder if this will be true for you, but I get told I look like Justin Timberlake, but from here to here. So like maybe just the eyeballs. Maybe we're both. Yeah, I kind of
Yeah.
see JT. Uh, but now we know each other as maybe a more accurate doppelganger.
Yeah, and this is the first time I've actually met like a doppelganger.
Yeah, same
Like
for me.
it's I was always kind of felt left out because I always had a twin. So I didn't need a doppelganger.
Right? Yeah, you have a legit actual twin.
Yeah.
Um, that is so funny. Yeah, so I would love to, I think part of this is just like exploring, learning more about each other. So, what's your why like men's empowerment coaching? Why leave? So like accounting, why go into accounting to begin with, and then why leave that at 31, similar to me, and start off on this journey?
When I was finishing up high school, I was going into junior college. I needed to choose a path.
Hmm.
And so I loved doing art and being an artist, but it was like if you're an artist, you're going to starve and
Hmm.
die.
Yeah.
But I was also good at business. And so an accounting was really easy for me. So I went into accounting and it just lined up. But that
Hmm.
was like what everyone was telling me to do. It's
Yeah.
what I thought I needed. And I just, over the last few years, have been doing a lot of soul work
Hmm.
uh, with Paul Chek and the Chek Institute, Holistic Lifestyle, Elliott Hulse, and Grounding Camp. And yeah, it just started making sense that it was, I just self-describe it as soul-crushing work. There's no meaning, no purpose to it. And part of the reason why I got into men's empowerment and being a coach for men is because we've been on this call for maybe 6 minutes, and 6 men have already committed suicide in the time that we've been on this call.
Oh, wow.
And 75% of men, out of the pool of people who commit suicide in the United States, 75% of them are men. So it's a huge thing with men feeling disempowered or feeling weak. And for me, if I could be a support and a light or provide any type of guidance, mentorship to these men, I'm all about it. And most men just need someone to talk to.
Yeah, for sure. And so was that, so you're working, doing the CPA work, and you started to kind of do some of this work yourself and discovered like this as, okay, this is not something that people are talking about. This is something that you're kind of passionate about. And you're like, okay, let me leave and see if I can go out and help other people. Like, is that kind of where it comes from?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I've been doing a lot of breath work, bioenergetics, active meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I noticed a lot of people, especially in the West and in the United States, it's just very analytical mind focused.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let me see what I can focus on my brain. And what I started realizing is as I was doing more of the breath and body work and opening up who I am as a person, these other layers started, like these other systems started
Mm-hmm.
coming on. And, you know, I'm an avid snowboarder.
Yep.
You don't know. I'm avid snowboarder. I've been I'm like, yeah, you know,
Yeah, you
we're the
know.
same.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been snowboarding for over half of my life. And for 10 years, I've dreamed of snowboarding in the Swiss Alps and being a snowboard instructor. And after I did Holistic Lifestyle Coach Level 2 with Paul Chek and the Chek Institute, it just made sense to me. It was one of my action items to go to Austria, become a snowboard instructor, and then snowboard in the Alps. And then from there, I was like, hey, I'm just going to figure this out.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, you have one goal, you set your mind to it, able to do it. So then what becomes next? So as it, like I think it's crazy because we do have similar backgrounds, and like especially if you're on the accounting side, I come from the engineering world, computer science, and so I have a good friend who's an accountant. We always joke back and forth where like, you know, who's nerdier, accountants or engineers, and you know, engineers I think are cooler because they're just accountants without the ties and you know, all that. But as an engineer, I'm always curious about things. So you mentioned a couple of phrases that I'm not necessarily familiar with that I'd love to learn a little bit more about. One, so breath work, I think I understand, just being more in tune with your breath, taking more like deeper breath and things like that. But then you also mentioned active meditation, and there was something else that you said kind of along that list that I had not heard before.
Bioenergetics.
Yeah, bioenergetics. So what is bioenergetics and what is active meditation?
Yeah, so from my understanding, my perspective, I think it started with Carl Jung or Freud. I think it was Jung.
Mm-hmm.
He started talking and noticing that people would, he was doing therapeutic or clinical work, that they'd have these like tics in their body as they would start talking about these traumatic experiences. So he started noting it. One of his students was Wilhelm Reich. And Wilhelm Reich really started jumping more into the bioenergies, like so biology, bio, and then energy is just subtle energy systems that are in our body. You know, there's a lot of energy that flows through our body. So Reich started really going in deeper into it. And then his student, Alexander Lowen, is kind of like the father of bioenergetics. So you could look up Alexander Lowen, and there's loads of books on it. And so from my understanding, my research, what I've studied and practiced is what happens is from an early developmental standpoint, as children, we're often suppressed or repressed. You know, it's like we're laughing, having a good time at church, and then parents are like, shut up, be quiet, you know, like stop laughing.
Yeah.
And we're just like, we get scared. So we start freezing in these experiences. And over time, what happens is we start developing this armoring. And this shows up in three areas, according to Lowen. The surface level is in the fascia.
Mm-hmm.
The next level is in our posture, our character structure, how we
Mm-hmm.
show up in the world. It's funny how you just
Yep, automatically. You say posture, and I got to improve my posture immediately. Of course.
so second level posture, character structure, and then lastly is in the organs. And so, like, how do you release energy that's stored in the organ? And the organs is through breath.
Mm-hmm.
So Lowen starts doing this work where he puts his clients in these stress breathing positions,
Mm-hmm.
having them do things like kick a bed, like lying on their stomach and kicking beds. And
Okay, that makes more. You immediately say that I'm assuming like a soccer or field goal kicking style thing, the side of a bed, which seems painful and not necessarily helpful. That makes more sense, what you said.
yeah, and even just doing something with working with your voice,
Mm-hmm.
right? So for me, I could tell when someone, because I've been there too, is more in their head because their voice is at a higher level.
Mm-hmm.
Versus when someone's more embodied, their breath is going deeper into their body. You could say their dentier or their sex center, deeper into their stomach.
Mm-hmm.
And stomach's where we house all of our life energy and we source our energy. And so then you could see it when someone's talking kind of higher, and then someone, hey, how's it going? Like really calm and stable. So bioenergetics is kind of more like the clinical work of it,
Mm-hmm.
practice. However, there's a couple of elements there which overarch with active meditation.
Okay.
And they are breath, from my perspective, breath, movement, and integration.
Mm-hmm.
So he has the breath, the movement might be like or
Mm-hmm.
like kicking, moving,
Mm-hmm.
and then the integration is kind of just chilling out. So now we jump into active
Mm-hmm.
meditation. Active meditation was designed by a gentleman named Osho. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
I have not. I don't think so. But pretty cool that it's a single name. So like pretty legit because he's known by one name, Osho. Okay.
yeah. Um, there's a documentary on him on Netflix called
Okay.
Wild Wild Country
Oh,
about how he's.
I've heard of the documentary, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, so this goes into some of his practices and his teachings and kind of a story about him setting up a commune in Oregon. So he designed active meditation because he would do these huge speaking events
Mm-hmm.
in grass fields. And one day he noticed that after all the people had left, thousands of people, all the grass was ripped out in certain areas.
Mm-hmm.
So what he noticed is, even though his voice, very calm and soothing, inducing a meditative state, these people, their minds were so active that traditional sit meditation is great when you're in the Himalayas
Mm-hmm.
and removed from everything.
Mm-hmm.
You can reach there. But how do you reach enlightenment or heighten your level of awareness when you're in the city? And so he started developing active meditations based on psychology and all these different principles and practices, which roughly incorporate the same exact thing as bioenergetics, from my perspective. Breath, movement, and stillness are integrated. So these meditations, again, you spend some time, all of them last an hour. You spend some time breathing, spend some time moving, being very active, and then some time in stillness.
Okay. And are you familiar with laughter yoga?
I am not.
Okay, so laughter yoga, and a good friend of mine, Ida, and a few other people that I know do a lot of it. It's not quite for me, but it's interesting because it's basically this idea that to get the physiological benefits of humor, of laughter specifically. So we know that when we laugh, we increase blood flow through our body, we release muscle tension in our body, we boost our immune system because more oxygen is going into the blood and all that kind of stuff. We lower our blood pressure. All these physiological benefits of humor or of laughter can happen whether that laughter is real or it is forced, right? If you force your like ha ha ha, like force yourself to laugh, And so I don't know who started it. I don't know much about the history of it, but it's basically there are laughter yoga instructors who will lead people through a laughter yoga session, which is getting them to laugh and a lot of breath work and a lot of movement so that they experience these benefits and it doesn't necessarily have to be from watching a Netflix comedy show.
Right.
So it sounds like there's some similarities or maybe some overlaps, or maybe it's a form of some of this kind of active meditation as an idea.
Yeah. And and to that point, when it comes to humor, how did you go from like what transpired from I'm an engineer, now I'm gonna quit my job, pack, like sell all my stuff, and I'm gonna travel to every state in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
do comedy shows, and then does that go to now I have a YouTube or now I'm on YouTube with TED having a
Mm-hmm.
TED talk that has over 5.5 million views.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess it's similar in some ways. Realize this just unbutton. Yeah, but I mean, so I'm first and foremost an engineer before anything, and that's how I was born. Like I was born 3 weeks early. Even in the womb, I was like obsessed with efficiency. Right? Like, how do I do this in short amount of time? And so, in school, I was always good at math, focused on that. Our family got our first computer like in the seventh grade, and I like was smitten. Like I was taking it apart and putting it back together again and seeing how it worked. And early internet days of dial-up, and then getting into like chat forums and learning more about the internet. And I joined the internet club in high school because I was super cool, and we made our high school's first website, and love computer science, get a degree in computer science and engineering from Ohio State, start working at Procter & Gamble as an IT project manager, and along the way, I was always good with computers, not as good with people.
Mm-hmm.
Socially awkward sometimes, not great at networking events, that kind of thing. And then in college, my best friend wanted to start an improv comedy group. He needed people and forced me to join, basically. And so I started doing improv and stand up, and I realized that improv and stand up was teaching me the skills that I needed to be effective with people. So,
Mm-hmm.
I was already good with computers. I don't need humor for that, but I need humor for engaging with people and getting them to actually listen to my message and relieving my own stress. And so I started exploring that at P&G. I proclaimed myself the corporate humorist of P&G, and was blogging about it. Well, it was amazing. Like the engineer in me was like, it wasn't just myself. I was finding all this research from a bunch of psychologists from different corporations, seeing that humor was an effective tool in the workplace. And that's what I liked about it as an engineer, was not just that it was about, hey, have fun in the workplace because you're going to spend a third of your adult wake life at work, so you should enjoy it. Like that's part of it, but it's more about like, oh, and by doing it, you're going to get better results. And so I was like, oh, yes, if this is going to help me do something better, I'm all for it. And the research was there. And so I started to explore it. Fell in love with speaking because it was stand up with a message. And so then did that more and more internally. Left P&G in 2012. So when I was, how old was I in 2012? 7 years ago. When I was like 27, 28, left P&G and still stayed in New York for a little while, building this business, this company called Humor That Works. And then a few years after that, at 31, then being like, all right, you know what? I'm traveling a lot anyway for work. Rent is expensive in New York. And what if I just don't have a set residence? What if I put all my stuff in storage and live out of two carry-on bags? And I ended up getting rid of most things. So I was like, oh, I don't actually, do I really need to keep an IKEA, coffee table in storage? Probably not. I can give that away on Craigslist. Um, so I did that, and yeah, and traveled for 18 months to all 50 states. Because as an engineer, I love checklists, right? And each of the states was a checklist to go to. And like now I'm working on my country count. I'm at 25 countries, trying to increase that. I'm at 6 continents, so I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to Antarctica next. And it's just that, like, how do I create this plan? And in creating that plan, how do I share this message of humor, similar to kind of that inspiration for you around empowerment coaching is that, with humor, no one's really talking about it, or there's not a ton of people talking about it in the workplace. There's a handful of us out there, but it's such an incredible tool, and it's such a part of the human experience that for us to go into work and feel like that we can't use humor to shut it down or to tamp it down is really to kind of dampen down our own personalities, our own identity of what it means to be human. And so as we increasingly work with AI and computers, it's going to be one of those things that emotions in general will be what will separate us from machines. And I love computers, but it's like, okay, well then how do we leverage what's good about humans and combine that with machines to get better results and more meaningful impact?
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the short answer, right? It's the engineering approach to say, okay, if this works, how do I get it out there? And similar to you, I think of having been this goal of like wanting to go and be a snowboard instructor. Like, okay, if a goal for me is to go out and speak, what do I need to do to get there? What things can I put into play, and what types of conversations can I have with people to try to make it a reality?
Right. And then how did the TED Talk come about?
So I've done two TEDx talks, and so it's a TEDx talk, so it's not the TED Global, so it's an independently run event. But that one came about. So my brother is a professor at Texas A&M, and so I go down to I go to College Station once every year, twice every year, once a semester, and guest teach his classes. And Texas A&M was hosting a TEDx event, and they're seeking out speakers. And one of his students who had seen one of my guest lectures and really liked it submitted my name as like, oh, you should reach out to this guy because I think he'd be a good fit for the talk. So they reached out to me, and I shared a couple of different topics with them. They really resonated with the idea of the skill of humor, because I do believe humor is a skill, which means it can be learned.
Hmm.
Same thing I imagine with like things like active meditation and empowerment. These are things that, people are like, even myself, when I first started trying to meditate, it's like, oh, I'm not good at it. So it's like, oh, I guess I won't do it. And it's like, oh, no, it's a practice. It takes time. Humor is exactly the same way of like, you may not be perfect right away, but with practice and repetition, you'll get better at it, regardless of whether or not you think you're naturally funny. It's simply a skill, a system, or set of behaviors. So if you start to do those behaviors, you start to become more of a humorist. And so that's what I talked about in the talk, was kind of this idea of that it is a skill that anyone can learn.
Hmm. And then how does it feel being kind of famous? 5.5 million views. I mean,
I mean, it's surreal because I don't feel any different, right? I don't feel any different than when it came out, and after 6 months, it had 3,000 views, right? And so then after a year, it had 1 million. So it had exponential growth at one point. And I don't really feel that. I don't, as a person, I don't feel any different than when it was at 3,000. The thing that has a positive impact is just that it's resonating with people. That it is kind of, it's some form of validation or credit that this is a message that people are interested in. And if you read the comments are hilarious to me. A lot of them are very positive. I've gotten fantastic. In fact, for the 2 year anniversary of it coming out, I explored just like all of the different messages that I've gotten from all around the world of how it's helped people in terms of giving them more confidence or giving them a different perspective or reminded them to have a little bit more fun, which is great. But then if you also look at the comments, there's some that are very supportive, and then there are some that are like of people that don't think that I'm funny. And the nice thing is with 5 million views is that I feel like I don't think 5 million people are hate watching it. Like, I don't think they're watching it the whole time and like, oh, this is terrible, but I'm watching the entire thing. And then I'm going to share it with other people so that they watch it because it's awful. I think that like there's some validation to say, okay, at least to some people, I am funny. So there's great validation in that. And I've realized like, if I can't spend my time focused on, there's 100,000 likes, like thumbs up on the video, and like 2,000 dislikes. So there's like a good number of people that have disliked it, but I've realized that, the more I focus on the haters, the people that don't like what I do,
mm,
every ounce of energy I put towards them is an ounce of energy that I'm not putting towards serving the people who do resonate with my message, the 100,000 or the 5 million people that have watched it. So seeing the kind of some of the YouTube haters was actually a very helpful part of my process of being like, okay, no, I'm not for everyone. Just as I imagine for you, like people, and I'll admit, like as an engineer, you hear things like, okay, bioenergy kind of makes sense, but then you talk about like breath work and some of these things, or even laughter yoga. For some people, they're like, okay, that's too woo woo. That's too like touchy feely for me. It sounds too kumbaya. And if that's the case, listen, your goal is you can't appeal to everyone. It's more about appealing to the people that do resonate with what you say and tweaking your message so that they can take it. I don't know. Do you feel that? Do you get that? Especially being, I'd imagine going from accountant to talking even about something like breath work seems like a big jump to people. And I don't know, would accountants of people that you worked with be like, yeah, I'm bored with this, or would be like, oh, that's kind of crazy?
I I felt my own personal experience in accounting was after 5 years working with hundreds of people, I have like three mates that I'm pretty well connected with. I
Mm-hmm.
just always felt like I wasn't square peg trying to get into a circle hole.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it just didn't feel right. And I was never like that great of an accountant. I wasn't passionate about it. So when I did talk and start like being more open with this at my last firm, people were always like, kind of raising their eyebrow, like,
Yeah.
"You're gonna go meditate for a week?" Like, what? They're like, "It's like sit," and I'm like, "No, not Vinyasa, like we're active." And they're
Yeah.
like, huh?
What? Hmm.
"Yeah." And so, but as I moved forward, it's interesting because the second I retired, people were like, "Yeah, I never saw you as an accountant anyhow." And then now, like the biggest criticism that comes forth is my own criticism, my own
Mm-hmm.
doubt. Especially, like all the clients that I work with are men, but I didn't want to say I was a men's empowerment coach
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to be inclusive of everyone. And I thought all these women would hate on me. However, the women that I've shared this with, they're ecstatic that I'm doing something. They're like, "I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for sharing this."
Mm-hmm.
And even if you look up hashtag empowering men versus empowering women on Instagram, I know it's not the best metric,
Mm-hmm.
but look at how many times the hashtag has been used. It's 100 to 1. There's 3.2 million empowering women hashtags versus 30,000 empowering men hashtags.
Wow.
So for me, and again, my participation with Movember, the world's leading men's health organization,
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost this November I'll have a mustache again,
Yep.
which is why I had the mustache in the picture.
Yep.
Um, but again, they're really doing change for men, and so there's like a huge need for it. And so again, the main thing for me is just my own self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And if I get the reinforcement or the criticism from the external world, it's like, for me, like I have to sleep next to myself.
Yeah.
So if I'm, "Oh man, you're a muck, like what are you doing?" Like all disempowering statements.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, and I think that in some ways, like failure is just data, right?
Yeah.
And so if something isn't working, you're just learning to, hey, how do I tweak and how do I improve for the message that you want to get? This particularly, like I think as a society, the trend in the past has certainly been that uh, I think I just saw a post like on this on Reddit, or someone on Twitter was saying it would be like if women were allowed to get angry and men were allowed to get sad, allowed to in today's society, like things would be a whole lot different. And we just have had this experience where the acceptable emotions for men seem to be mostly anger. Like it's okay, yeah, if you get angry and you like punch a hole in the wall, that's like, oh, that's a common thing. But if you're like sad and sitting in a room and like you actually have tears and things like that, that suddenly you're not like quote unquote man enough. And so it's funny because we're like trying to, I don't know, discount emotions, and like that's so much what it is to be human, is to be able to understand emotions. And again, similar to failure as data, I think of emotions as data.
Mm,
And like for me, it helps inform decisions for me. Like if something is making me happy, great, do more of that. If something is making me upset, okay, understand why that's making me upset. What's the trigger? Is it something that's connected specifically to me? Is it to other people? Like how do I use that to inform decisions that I'm going forward? Like it's another input, essentially.
Right. Yeah, and I think humor is such an important thing because there's so much wrapped up with the suppression. Uh, I'm reading this book right now called Joy by Alexander Lowen,
Oh yeah.
and he talks about how even laughter is deeply suppressed,
Mm-hmm.
where people will laugh, ha 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 ha, like it's just in there, like it's not a real laugh.
Mm-hmm.
Like a laugh is something where it's like hurting your stomach because you're laughing so hard,
Yeah.
and so even with laughter. And so that's why I think it's so empowering what you're doing is bringing a sense of humor, like lightheartedness, have fun to the workplace, especially in corporations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, and again, it goes back to like the research supports this. So one of the, I don't know if you're familiar with Project Aristotle that they did at Google.
No.
So I read about it in Charles Duhigg's book, Smarter, Faster, Better, which is a fantastic book about like motivation teams and all that. And in it, he talks about Project Aristotle. So Google wanted to understand what makes for effective teams, right? They're very big into data. And so like, let's see what we have high performing teams and we have low performing teams. Let's see if we can understand the correlation between why some teams are high performing, some are low. So they looked at 180 teams. They looked at 180 attributes over the course of 2 years, and what they found, it wasn't like team size. It wasn't like, oh, every effective team is exactly 12 people. It wasn't leadership style. Like every high performing team has a leader that is more laissez-faire, more dictatorial, or whatever. And it wasn't even personalities on the team. The only correlation that they could find, and it took them a while to find it, was that the high performing teams all had psychological safety. And psychological safety, they defined, at least my understanding of it, is kind of defined as one, that people feel like they can be their authentic self at work, right? They don't have to put on a work face. They don't have to try to pretend to be someone who they're not.
Yeah.
And two, that if they make a mistake, that they won't be made fun of or reprimanded for it. And how you create psychological humor is a great way to create psychological safety, particularly improvisation and the mindset of yes and improvisation is how you translate, okay, what does psychological safety mean into an organization where more people practice yes and, right? Because if you
Mm-hmm.
say something and you know that I'm going to and it, if I'm going to be like, yes, and this, as opposed to, yeah, but what about all these things that are wrong with your idea? Like the but part, you're going to be less likely to incorporate, but the and part, you're going to be like, okay, I can be my authentic self and I can offer up this idea and recognize that we're going to treat failure as data and that it's not the end of the world and that you're stupid for having messed up. It's not commentary on your worth as a human. It's just to say, hey, that the actions that you took did not get the results that you wanted in this particular case. So here's some feedback to maybe make it better the next time you do it.
Wow. So yeah, I didn't know that safety equated roughly to humor and just being able to like show up authentically.
Yeah, I mean, like in a way, I think humor is a tool to get some of these other things at work. Because to your point, like I love the data that you have around the number of hashtags. Because I do the same thing with humor in the workplace. If you look at humor in the workplace in terms of monthly searches on Google, there's about 1,000 globally, only 1,000. Whereas if you look at, say, communication skills or employee engagement or stress management, all of those things have millions of searches, hundreds of thousands of searches every single month. And so people aren't looking at humor in the workplace. They think of it as, it's kind of a nice to have. And part of my mission is try to elevate the status of humor to say that
Mm,
no, this is an effective strategy for getting some of these things that we want, for getting psychological safety, for getting stress management.
mm-hmm. And so do you envision yourself continuing to do these talks at corporations?
Yeah, I mean certainly. So I have a passion because when I sell to an organization, it's like, hey, here's what you're going to get: employee productivity. You're going to get like increased employee engagement. You're going to decrease turnover. All these benefits for the organizations. But when I'm talking to the individual groups, it's really about reaching the individual. It's empowering the individual to say, you are responsible for your own happiness. You
Hmm.
decide how you do your work every single day, and regardless of what your managers say or do, you own your experience. And so here are some strategies that you can use to improve your own situation so that you are more present for your family when you go home. So you are more proactive in creating kind of the lifestyle and the things that you want, whether that's in an organization or not. And so certainly still have that passion for reaching out to groups. And I love, I grew up kind of within the corporate world of P&G, so I enjoy that. But I'm also more lately been exploring kind of this concept of humor in unexpected places. So it's unexpected that with engineering, so that's kind of how I started. Then I've done work with interesting, more conservative organizations like the FBI. And then I'm more and more of like, how do we use it for, like, say, the United Nations? How do we use humor as a way to better communicate around the Sustainable Development Goals? Or I've been doing some work with the Red Cross on how do we help humor have better results within, say, disaster preparedness or risk management. And I was doing some work with a guy named Pablo, who works at the Red Cross, and we incorporated some humor into some of his programs. And he realized that, like, if you're teaching something that's gonna, like, potentially save someone's life, like disaster preparedness or risk management, if they are bored when you're presenting, that can have very serious consequences, right? Like if you're at a marketing meeting and people aren't paying attention, then it's like, okay, they don't understand the next Twitter thing that's happening, right? But if you're like
Right.
in a presentation about here's what to do if this disaster happens, and you're checked out because the speaker is boring, that has very serious consequences. And so, how do we use humor effectively to communicate serious or important messages in a way that isn't to make, say, oh, this is light and not important, but to say, we know that humor is effective at getting people to pay attention and remembering things. So why wouldn't we apply it to serious subject matters that people need to know? And so that's where I've been starting to explore more and more, is how do we leverage humor in these unexpected places for even better, more important results.
Wow. That's fascinating. My brain instantly goes, how could I implement humor more into empowering people? I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, that would,
exactly. Like how do
yeah.
you, and you can use it as a way to how you're building rapport with people and getting them comfortable with talking with you, or adding a little bit of fun. So in addition to some of the normal exercises that you're doing, what are some of the things that you're doing to get them to laugh a little bit more, to see their own skill? Because I think, humor is such an empowering tool. And you see
Hmm.
it, like a good friend of mine named David Naihu, who wrote a book called "Do You Talk Funny?" and is like helps people learn how to present in a way that's funnier. He talks about it in his programs of like when you see a speaker get a laugh, it's the same thing as when you mentioned kind of posture, and my posture went up. When a speaker gets a laugh, they
Yeah.
relax, they settle in, they feel more confident. Even like I don't know if you've ever seen the TED Talk from Amy Cuddy on the power of body language. So she's an expert talking on body language, and she gets her first laugh, and her body language improves and is more confident once she has that laugh, because it's like you settle in a little bit. And so humor is an incredibly empowering tool for helping people feel a little bit more confident in themselves and their ideas. I felt it kind of firsthand when I first started doing comedy of like, oh wait, no, I can kind of do this. Maybe my message is worth sharing more with people. So I think it's an incredibly important thing that you could be sharing with people in terms of empowerment, for sure.
Wow. Yeah, thank you for that. Well, just being mindful of your time.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to add or talk about or ask questions? Like,
No, I mean, I think it's fascinating. It's so funny. It starts with our conversation started just because we look similar. And as you were talking, I realized I'm gonna have to tag a friend of mine named Adam Smisney in this, because I think you look like me plus Adam together. Like it's that, like it'll be that integration or that morph maybe of people. But it's funny that a fascinating conversation starts just because of that similarity, and us not knowing each other at all, growing up in very different places, but having somewhat similar journeys of a very kind of left brain kind of logical style of math focus career, and
yeah,
then going into something else. It's cool. So I'm happy we connected here, and I'm excited for us to connect in the future as well.
yeah. Likewise, and thank you so much for your time, Drew. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
And
thanks for inviting me to the Facebook Live.
you're welcome, man. Have an epic day, and we'll talk soon
All
or
right, sounds
sometime.
good. Ciao.
All right. Ciao.